Good evening, everyone. It's your host, Malik Washington. How's everyone doing this fine day or evening, wherever you all reside? I hope everybody's doing well. I exhort courage, bravery, strength, understanding, and many more virtues to you all, whoever needs it that are lacking in it. And if you are having a wonderful time, I wish you all the best in all of your good times, and may you hold on to it forevermore, or at least for as long as you can. Because as we know, life isn't always going to give you happiness and, well, good times anyway. You know, the last episode that I did was fairly interesting. Very interesting. I got to talk to a great many of you, and maybe even some of you have subscribed. I'm not for sure whether if we agreed or disagreed. I had very interesting responses, some of which were remarks. I think people were commenting towards the short itself, but they were not necessarily comprehending the entire episode. And the specific types of individuals I'm referring to are of the male gender. And simply because of what I gave as a neutral analytical question that I left open-ended on purpose, because I wanted to see where different men varied on their understanding of masculinity and where they were going to argue from. It proved my initial point in the original video, which was about is masculinity losing its foothold, on how men were perceiving their own understanding of masculinity. And I was correct, as well as what the American Pew Research Center statistics suggested, that lower than 50% of men don't highly identified as masculine, whereas the majority either could not define what masculinity was, or they did not quite understand where to orient their masculinity. And I was basing that off of the premise that the reason why this is essentially the case is because we are in a society where things are constantly changing. We're living in an equalized society. If you have two genders doing the exact same things that men at one point in time, especially during a time when women could not pay taxes, they could not work the same jobs as men could do. They didn't have the same access to opportunities that men did. And so now that that access has been granted and women are essentially moving into these places where men found true expression in being masculine, how then do we orient said masculinity if you are the person that hinges your description of masculinity on things such as fatherhood, such as working, such as providing, etc., etc. And I was asking these things not to go against the men, but rather it was to get men to see that among all of us, we don't even unanimously come to the conclusion of what masculinity even looks like. I've heard some of you guys say you really don't care for the labels, that you both work in tandem with your partner, or in this case, your woman, your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, right? And that you don't put any identity labels of your masculinity towards when you're working or anything like that, because it's an occupation. I've heard some of you say you just don't care for it. You don't care what society says. I've heard some of you say that your masculinity is flexible, or you do exactly what women do, but you still feel like a man. Everybody is saying different things, and that was my point. And then I get from the other side some people who either were trolls, who were just not listening whatsoever, or they did not comprehend what I was saying, because the main thing I was getting was, oh, you're a simp. Oh, you're trying to defend women. You need to stop trying to defend them. Oh, you're trying to say that equality is displacing us as men. Not at all. I didn't make any of these arguments, but these arguments apparently were being made on my behalf because of a lack of understanding and comprehension to what I was trying to get men to see. That if there were men out here, not me personally, because that was another thing people were saying, that they felt like I was trying to take everything that I was describing and hinging my masculinity upon these issues. I don't have a problem with my masculinity. My masculinity is pretty secure. I'm pretty confident in myself. This is not some kind of insecurity with me. I'm looking at a data point and I'm hinging my arguments or my understanding and analysis from that specific data point and asking you all, based off of this data point, where do you stand when it comes to masculinity, and how are you navigating your masculinity in a society that is constantly changing? Roles are converging. Women don't appreciate you as much. And you're now having to find a different way of trying to discover who you are, as opposed to looking at yourself through society or through women. In fact, I was encouraging that if this was something you were struggling with, to orient that elsewhere. And people took that completely out of context. More specifically, the men were taking it completely out of context, saying that basically I was trying to tell men to change. I wasn't telling men to do shit, but simply to realign yourself somewhere else if you're not appreciated. It's the equivalent of if you're in a bad relationship. It's the equivalent if someone isn't treating you right. It's the equivalent if you go to a school and people don't appreciate you for being black, or people don't like you because you're poor, or whatever the case may be, and you're getting this constant pushback because of a certain demographic you may or may not represent. And the same way with this descriptor of being a masculine man, I'm saying take that, still retain who you are, keep being who you are if you don't give a shit. I don't care if you don't care, but the bottom line is, to the crowd that does care, to the crowd that does hinge their beliefs on something, their descriptor of masculinity on something, reorient it elsewhere if it bothers you that said changes are happening. Reorient yourself if it bothers you that women no longer look to you for masculinity. To hell with them. That's literally what I was making the argument towards. But let the men tell it, this fringe of men, it wasn't all. Let these group of men tell it. I was trying to tell men to change. I was telling men to be like feminists. I was supporting feminism. And in no way, shape, or form was that the case. I wasn't on anyone's side. I was presenting a neutral analysis. But this kind of goes into my next episode, right? Because I want to delve into the understanding of free speech, but free speech from the lens of you're free to speak, but you're not safe from how you speak. So the title of this episode is You're Free to Speak, but You're Not Safe. And the reason why I am talking about this particular episode is because we're living now in a time where obviously free speech was never free in the way that, of course, the Constitution conveys it. As the Constitution conveys it, is that every man, woman, and of course, developing child has the ability to speak freely without restriction or apprehension or reprimanding due to speaking things that are perhaps not of government interest, that goes against government interest, that goes against individual beliefs, individual ideas, individual understandings of how people perceive life to be, right? It's essentially the heart of the Constitution. It's the First Amendment. The Constitution was created as an antithesis against clearly the Crown back then, because the Crown obviously would not let you speak up against the government, let alone the aristocracy itself. You could not speak sedition. And if you did, that would lead to obviously either torture or imprisonment or even death. And that depends on, of course, the severity of your speech. Britain today they kind of embrace some elements of some of the Americans' Western idea of speech and the ability to speak it. But there are still consequences behind you speaking the things that you say. You can take, for instance, that Britain has this rule, this very arduous and draconian rule, that if one were to speak certain things that were, I guess you could say, either bigoted or it was against maybe the aristocracy in some way, shape, or form, they actually take the post that you made online and they come to your actual home and they arrest you for merely posting something they found to be degrading or they didn't agree with, or it's something that they feel could cause or raise tension in their great society, while allowing certain other crimes to persist that they shouldn't, right? But we'll get into that another time. I use that as an example to say this is one of many reasons why freedom of speech exists. Freedom of the press exists. The freedom to express yourself exists. Because even though one may consequentially in life, everything we do, it's always going to be some kind of issue with somebody. If I'm a Christian, someone who's an atheist is going to have a problem with it. If I'm an atheist, someone who's a believer is going to have a problem with me not believing in the God that they believe in. If I'm in Islam, somebody's going to have a problem with it who may be a Christian, or even, I wouldn't even say the Hebrew Israelites, but essentially anyone who is anti against your belief, they may have a problem with it, and it might lead to extreme actions. While there's nothing wrong with disagreement, and strong disagreement at that, because sometimes some beliefs have irreconcilable differences, that is the goal of freedom of speech, is for people to have the legal acknowledgement and recognition and God-given right to be able to say the things that they say, and it doesn't lead to, let's say, governmental consequences, governmental restrictions, which is what the Constitution was based on, restricting government access to individual liberties, pursuit of happiness, and your ability to speak your mind, right? However, we do know that freedom of speech is not without its restrictions in real life, in real time. What do I mean by this? Something as simple as, let's say you're having a conversation, let's say you're having a conversation with your friends, and eventually, sometimes conversations tend to be a bit of a mixed bag. Y'all might get serious, and then other times you might jest, you might joke a lot. And let's say that you say something to your friend in jest that wasn't meant to be offensive, but it could be borderline offensive simply because what you said was controversial. So perfect example, in the black community, black people love to use your mama jokes, right? And there are some among us who they can't take your mama jokes because some people love their mothers, clearly, right? I seldom really hear a lot of people get offended when you say your daddy, but they do get offended when you say your mama. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so you could throw your mama jokes out there and maybe a good 50 people might accept it. They may just roast you back. But then that other 50 people might look at you and say, hey, don't you talk about my mama. Don't say that shit no more, or it's going to be a problem. And of course, one could say, obviously, the dude is sensitive, the girl is sensitive, whatever the case may be. It's meant to be jokes, but this person is now taking it to a whole other level, right? So it just escalated. That becomes a form of a lack of safety there. Because while you should be able to say your mama jokes and it doesn't lead to somebody obviously wanting to fight you for it, that person wants to fight you. Right? Let's even give another example. Let's go on a more political level. Let's take the time when COVID was around. And certain people were getting censored because they were bringing up things about COVID that the government, the CDC, and others who were more mainstream were defending the CDC's reasoning, as well as Dr. Fauci and the rest of them, on how COVID came about, the 6 feet, 6 feet apart, wearing the mask. But you had people who were anti all of that. And due to the fact that they were anti many of those things, the internet became the impetus to basically promote everything mainstream and block and censor anything else that went against mainstream ideals or mainstream understandings about COVID, right? So much so people were being propagated whatever Dr. Fauci and them wanted to be promoted, and that was declared as truth. But for some reason, everything that everyone else spoke up about, the doctors that came out and said that COVID was stemming from Wuhan, China, that there are some treatments that could be used in order for people to be to heal from COVID, but mainstream doctors were and pharmaceutical companies were speaking against it. All these things were happening, preventing people from being able to speak it. If YouTubers or influencers were to speak up about it, we're getting community notes, we're getting strikes, we're getting channels taken down, we're getting told that you're spreading misinformation. That was the huge word of the 4 years of the first administration, Trump administration, and leading into the Biden administration. That was happening ad nauseum, right? And not that Trump was personally an advocate for censorship, but even he, to a certain degree, was being censored for speaking certain things, especially saying that COVID stemmed from Wuhan, China. When years later, we come to find out it did come from Wuhan, China, but people were saying he was being xenophobic. So speech is getting censored. People are speaking it, but consequentially, this is what's happening. You have some people in our society that, even though they're Americans, they don't agree with freedom of speech being absolute. There should be restrictions. There's a big one, even with hate speech. They separate the two. People should have the freedom to speak, but then there's the component where people are saying things about people that are derogatory. It's a pejorative, and these things should not be expressed out in public by people in direct offense towards others. But here's the problem with that sentiment. That would completely even go against the First Amendment in and of itself. For the simple fact, think about the reason why the Constitution was established in the first place. Think about why the First Amendment even exists. Think about why the Second Amendment exists. It's literally to spew whatever is on your heart and mind against the very entity that was causing you the pain and suffering and the inability to express the things you wanted to say in the first place. Particularly, I'm talking about the government. The crown could say and do anything to its citizens. The citizens couldn't say anything against the crown, the crown, despite the fact that they had the absolute right to speak it, because the crown was doing irreputable acts against their citizens, and particularly during the age of when King George III was king over England or Great Britain. And that being said, when you look at free speech, we are supposed to be able to speak our minds because, for one, we're all adults. It's understandable that there's going to be things that said you don't like. There's going to be things that are spoken against you that you don't tolerate. But imagine you trying to control and restrict the speech of everyone around you because it's something that they said you don't like. That same logic could be applied to you if you said something that someone didn't like. Because now we're getting to a point to where you're now creating this environment where everyone has to walk on eggshells. No one is perfect. People say a lot of shit people don't like. It should not escalate to some of these major issues that people either bring up, speak up against, or even say things towards you that you don't appreciate or like. It's a lot of things people said to me over the years I've never appreciated or liked. Did I try to stop them from speaking it? No. But if it bothered me just that much, I either talked back to them, told them what it is and what it isn't, or I walked away. As simple as that, because I can't control how a person speaks or talks. But I can control myself, because the one thing I know I'm not going to do is let anyone talk to me any kind of way. I'm not going to argue forever, but I'm also not going to let you get away with what you said, especially if I'm being accused of something I didn't do. You're misrepresenting or mischaracterizing the things that I say. I'm going to speak up against that. Having that freedom to do that grants me that choice, in spite of the fact that consequentially it could get me into skirmishes, fights, or even deep-seated arguments that leads to the end of relationships. That's just the trade-off of being a person that has the freedom to speak your mind. You take another example of how it's unsafe to speak your mind. Assassinations are a perfect example. There's conspiracies surrounding the death of JFK and why he ended up dying. We had a most recent huge scandal with the influence. I want to say he's kind of an influencer, but he's more of a truth teller than anything. You take the Christian Charlie Kirk. He passed away as a result of his speech. Now, of course, there's a lot going on with his case. Tyler Robinson, Candace Owens, ideals about whether Charlie Kirk's death was due to one person or multiple, but I'm not here to argue that case. I'm using the general example that his situation, it could kind of tie in to a lack of safety when it comes to speaking your mind, because just for merely inviting disagreement and saying, I'm willing to challenge what it is that you say, not take away from you, but challenge everything that you're saying, and you challenge me on my ideas, that created a problem to where the human tradition of taking someone out because they said something you didn't like actually grants this permission to some people to think you don't deserve to live on the earth because you said something that hurt my feelings, or you said something that goes against whatever motives I have going on the dark side that no one knows about, and you're bringing it to light. We're going to have to stop you. These things are happening in real time. Nothing about freedom is actually free. It comes with restrictions. It comes with consequences. The Constitution doesn't guarantee you that. The Constitution is a written it's a written legislation. It's not going to protect you from getting into skirmishes. It's not going to protect you from people disagreeing with you. It's not going to protect you from people who want to see you dead. Another form of unsafety is like when people dox. That's another issue where, especially since the online age has come into the fray, because people don't like what you say and do, guess what they also do? They start to put out your information about your family. They put out information about where you live. They try to take you out from your work from your employer, where you're making money. That's your livelihood. They're trying to destroy your livelihood, cancel you completely. And there are networks of people who have campaigns that if you reach the right crowd, you shake the beehive, they're going to tear you apart slowly but surely. It'd be easy to kill you, but if you're big, they don't want to make a martyr out of you. They did it to Charlie Kirk. Look what that did. That backfired. But nonetheless, these things happen, and it can get dangerous out here when you're speaking. But when you're speaking freely, nobody that has ever spoke their mind in this world has ever went unscathed. They didn't. Nobody has ever been met unchallenged. Nobody that has ever been outspoken, it has been unchallenged. Nobody has been tested by fire as far as people messing with them, heckling them, mischaracterizing their positions, misrepresenting their arguments, doing all of those things. This is the consequence of having said freedoms. Nothing about it is immaculate. And if you want those freedoms, you have to fight like hell to keep it. As I even said in the other episode, when it came to fighting for your masculinity, if you feel like you're losing it, you got to fight like hell to keep it. Some of you, of course, said, well, if you're already masculine, you don't have to fight for it. Sir, I ain't talking about you've already having to not fight for something that you don't have to fight for anyway, because you're standing by what you believe. There's nothing to fight. You're standing on that hill. You're not convinced. You're a stick in the mud, or we can just say that you're a stickler. You're not going anywhere. Right? But point being is freedom isn't free. Never has been, never will be. Those people back then, they had to fight for their freedoms. Today, you don't necessarily have to die, but it is a part of the contract of living in America if you want to be able to speak your mind. If you're in other worlds where you don't agree with that whatsoever, but you do believe in speaking your heart out, that comes with the consequence. Of having to fight against the system you're in as well. Because whereas here you can speak against the government, you won't be killed for it. Other places you will. And it's harder to even express yourself there because not very many people stand up. I think if oppressed enough, many will stand up. But if it's just a few, Too many people are too scared to stand up because the consequences are greater than the actual benefits. But nothing about what you do in this life, even outside of a legislation or a parchment, is going to save you from real life. And all I can tell you is, ladies and gentlemen, that as free men and women that have the ability to speak your mind, be prepared for come what may, because you can't stop it. But guess what? They can't do either. They can't stop you unless you let them to, and you grant them the permission to hold credence over your entire life and your livelihood and how you express yourself. So exercise your freedoms or give them away. Entirely your choice, but you're definitely not safe. All right, people, I hope you enjoyed this episode and it provided you some insight on this episode. That concludes this. Have a good day or good night wherever you reside. I thank you for listening. If you got this far, like, comment, subscribe to this channel. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions about my positioning, please ask the question before you imply things about me or imply things about my arguments that I did not make. If you genuinely want to know what my direct intent is about my episodes, my podcasts, my arguments, I'm open. Talk to me. And I will tell you what it is that I said so that you can argue against me properly. I invite disagreement. I have no qualms with anyone who may feel differently. But understand this. I'm not against anybody, male or female indifference. And hell, I don't even defend people like that. But I will defend the truth. And if there are people within the truth that happen to be there with me, then those people are simply with the truth, and I will defend the truth alongside them. But I'm not going to defend individuals or defend grown men and grown women. You can defend yourselves, just like I have to defend myself when it comes to some of the mischaracterizations and misrepresentations of my arguments you all make against me. But nonetheless, I don't mind it because that comes with this. And then on top of that, short form content, it sucks ass as well, because it's not giving the full scope of what my actual arguments is. And some of you all have short attention spans anyway. Another thing is too, someone said, and I kind of wanted to address that too. Someone said that my rhetoric is dangerous. And I thought that was funny because I vehemently disagreed with it, saying that, no, I'm not being dangerous at all. I'm simply presenting a question and I'm seeing if you all are willing to answer it. And I'm going to go even deeper if I find that your answer either isn't adequate enough or if you're not really going as in depth as you should. But the more I think about it, maybe perhaps my rhetoric is dangerous because I'm asking the questions you all are not thinking about enough. If something is dangerous, that's implying that there's something within you that you think is shaking and you don't know how to tackle that danger. And you feel like that if I tackle that danger against you, it's going to manifest something within you never thought about before. But let me say this to you. Maybe I am dangerous and I will continue to be dangerous. And I'm glad that you told me this, because to anybody out there, if my rhetoric is that dangerous to you, then be prepared for me to come even harder. No pun intended there. Be prepared for me to come even harder, because I'm not going to stand idly by and just shut myself up because somebody out there doesn't appreciate or like what I said, or feels that it's going against some of the tropes you all love to promote in the world and let it go unchallenged. I'm sorry if you feel like these traditional thoughts should remain there. I'm willing to tackle the traditional thoughts and even some of the progressive thoughts that are out there. But if merely proposing a question is a danger to your mindset, then I welcome your fear of it, because maybe it does need to be challenged a bit. It doesn't take away from you, but maybe it will take away the fear that you have to discuss it, because that's the point of breaking mental barriers, breaking that chain so that we can have that conversation and you can be free to speak your mind and respectfully disagree. And I can be able to freely speak my mind and challenge you, even if you don't agree with me and what I'm saying to you concerning your belief. So I'm going to keep coming. And if you continue to keep watching, that's on you. I'm not forcing you to listen to what I have to say, but I do hope you gain something out of it. And hopefully I gain something out of you. I don't hold the cards to all knowledge. I'm just here to ask the questions, even be challenged and challenge others. That's it. That's all. Like it or leave it. And you have the freedom to do that. I promise you, I'm not going to take away your freedoms. All right, people. Take care. Peace.